What if I told you that one of the most important energy compounds in your body is not declining because of age alone, but because the systems that keep it fully stocked are slowly being outpaced by the demands of aging itself? And what if that quiet decline helps explain why so many people over 60 say the same things in different words? I get tired faster, my legs feel heavier, I recover slower, my mind is sharp some days and strangely foggy on others. I sleep, but I do not always feel restored. I still have strength, but it takes more effort to access it. And what if I told you that one of the simplest ways to support that system is not exotic, not new, and not priced like a miracle, but is a compound your muscles and brain have been using every second of your life to keep energy moving where it is needed most? Because this is where the real story begins, not with a stimulant, not with another trendy powder, not with a promise to make you feel 25 again by next Tuesday, but with a molecule called creatine monohydrate. Most people think creatine belongs to bodybuilders, gym bags, and young athletes chasing bigger lifts. That misunderstanding has hidden one of the most interesting healthy aging tools in plain sight. Because by the time you reach your 60s, the question is no longer just how much energy you produce over the course of a day. The question is how quickly your cells can regenerate energy in the exact second they need it. When you rise from a chair, when you catch yourself before a fall, when you carry groceries upstairs, when you walk faster to cross a street, when your brain has to sustain attention through fatigue, stress, poor sleep, illness, or recovery. That rapid energy system is where creatine lives, and when it is understocked, aging feels steeper than it has to. I've spent years reading the research on metabolic health, muscle aging, and the biology of resilience in older adults, and what struck me most was not that creatine can help athletes perform better. That has been known for a long time. What struck me was how often the literature kept circling back to older adults, muscle preservation, strength, functional performance, recovery, brain energy, memory, independence, fall-related risk markers. Again and again, the same theme appeared. This wasn't just a sports supplement accidentally wandering into geriatric science. It was a basic energy compound with implications far beyond the weight room. To understand why adding it to your morning coffee may help, you need to see 5 things clearly. First, what actually changes in your muscles and brain after 60, and while energy is often a much more cellular problem than people realize. Second, what creatine really is, because most explanations are so shallow they miss the mechanism that matters. Third, the 5 ways creatine may support healthy aging, especially when the goal is not bodybuilding, but strength, energy, mobility, and staying capable for as long as possible. Fourth, what the clinical evidence in older adults actually shows, with real numbers, real limitations, and the difference between what is established and what is still emerging. And fifth, the exact protocol, the dose, the timing, whether coffee is actually a good idea, the mistakes that make it less effective, and who needs to be careful before taking it. Because this is not about hype. It is about using the right tool for the right problem, and the problem starts earlier and deeper than most people think. After 60, at least 3 things begin to converge, not in everyone at the same speed and not in the same order, but with enough consistency that the pattern is impossible to ignore. The first is sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass and function. This is not just about looking smaller or feeling weaker. Muscle is one of the most metabolically important tissues in your body. It helps regulate glucose disposal, it supports balance, it stabilizes joints, it protects you during illness, it acts like a reserve tank for resilience. When muscle shrinks, the consequences radiate outward. Movements you once performed automatically begin to cost more energy. You slow down without deciding to. Fatigue arrives sooner, recovery takes longer, and one of the most dangerous things that can happen in later life begins to creep closer. Not a diagnosis. A fall. The second is anabolic resistance. This phrase matters because many people assume that if they eat enough protein and stay somewhat active, their muscles should respond the way they used to. But older muscle often becomes less responsive to the very signals that once built and preserved it. Protein does less, exercise still helps. But the response can be blunted. The body is not refusing adaptation. It is simply becoming harder to convince, which means the same habits that maintained function at 45 may not be enough at 65. The third is a decline in rapid energy buffering. This is the part almost nobody explains. Your cells run on ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the immediate energy currency of life, but ATP is spent incredibly fast. In moments of sudden demand, your body cannot wait around for a slow energy delivery system to catch up. It needs a reserve, a buffer, a way to recharge ATP almost instantly. That is what the phosphocreatine system does. Creatine, stored largely in muscle and also used in the brain, helps regenerate ATP when demand spikes. The system is most obvious during high-intensity effort, but that does not mean it matters only to athletes. For an older adult, high intensity may simply mean standing up quickly, climbing stairs, stabilizing after a misstep, lifting a suitcase, or sustaining mental effort when tired. When that reserve is low, life feels more expensive. Now combine those three changes: less muscle, harder to stimulate muscle, less rapid energy buffering. Suddenly, the complaint "I just don't have the same energy" stops sounding vague. It becomes biological, and there is one more layer to this. The brain is an energy-demanding organ. Even mild disturbances in cellular energy handling can show up as mental fatigue, slower processing, reduced resilience under stress, and the frustrating sensation that you are still yourself, but accessing your sharpness takes more work. That does not mean every brain fog episode is a creatine issue. Of course not. But it does mean energy metabolism belongs in the conversation. So what is creatine really? Creatine is a naturally occurring compound made from amino acids and found in foods like meat and fish. Your body also produces some on its own, mainly in the liver and kidneys, and then transports it to tissues that need rapid energy support, especially skeletal muscle and the brain. Once there, a portion of it is stored as phosphocreatine. When ATP is used and quickly depleted, phosphocreatine donates a phosphate group so ATP can be regenerated fast, not eventually, fast. This is why researchers refer to the creatine-phosphocreatine system as an energy buffer or shuttle. It helps move and stabilize energy where demand is urgent. If you want the simplest analogy, think of ATP as cash in your wallet and phosphocreatine as the emergency reserve in your pocket. When you need to pay immediately, you do not wait for the bank to process a transfer. You reach for what is already there. That matters more with age, not less. Because aging is not just the passage of time. It is the accumulation of moments in which resilience is tested. A missed step, a demanding week, an infection, poor sleep, a stretch of inactivity, recovery after surgery, resistance training, rehabilitation. Life does not ask whether you are retired. It still asks your cells for energy. On demand. So why coffee? In one sense, coffee is just a delivery vehicle. Creatine is doing the long game work. Caffeine is doing the short game work. Coffee can improve alertness, reduce perceived effort, and make morning routines more consistent. That consistency matters, because creatine works by saturating your tissues over time. It is not a stimulant you feel in 20 minutes. It is more like filling a reservoir. The benefit comes from daily use, not from a dramatic first dose. Adding it to coffee can make adherence easier because habits are powerful, but the coffee is not the magic. The creatine is the point. And now we get to the 5 mechanisms that make this relevant for healthy aging. The first is immediate energy regeneration. This is the foundation everything else builds on. When your cells use ATP, especially during sudden exertion, creatine helps regenerate it through the creatine kinase and phosphocreatine system. Reviews of the literature describe this as a primary rapid response energy pathway. In practical terms, that means creatine supports the kind of burst energy that everyday function depends on. The body is not just trying to produce energy over hours, it is trying to maintain energy availability in the second you need it. That difference matters enormously in older adults, because so much of independence depends on short windows of force production and quick stabilization. The research base for creatine as an ergogenic aid began in sport, but its meaning becomes almost more human in aging. It is not about hitting a personal record deadlift. It is about making daily life less mechanically costly. The second mechanism is muscle preservation and strength. This is where the data become especially compelling. Meta-analyses in older adults have repeatedly found that creatine, when combined with resistance training, increases lean tissue mass and improves strength more than resistance training alone. One review of aging adults reported roughly 1.37 kilograms greater gains in lean tissue mass in some pooled analyses, with significant improvements in upper and lower body strength. Another analysis found similar effects, including better chair stand performance. That matters because chair stand capacity is not some abstract lab metric. It tracks real-world function. It tracks whether getting up remains ordinary or becomes a struggle. And here is what makes this so important. In later life, strength is not vanity. Strength is insurance. It is the difference between catching yourself and collapsing, the difference between living independently and gradually outsourcing more of your life to fragility, the difference between a body that negotiates aging and a body that simply absorbs it. Creatine is not replacing exercise here. It is amplifying the adaptation. It helps older muscle do more with the training signal it receives. Not infinitely, not magically, but meaningfully. The third mechanism is functional performance and fall-related risk. A lot of people hear muscle mass and picture the mirror. That is the wrong picture. The right picture is a kitchen chair, a staircase, a curb in the rain, the back step you almost missed because your foot did not clear it fully. When researchers looked at functional outcomes in older adults, creatine supplementation during training improved sit-to-stand performance, with one review citing about a 23% improvement in creatine-supplemented participants versus 16% in placebo groups. It also improved leg strength, another major predictor of stability. That may sound modest until you understand what aging does with small margins. Later in life, small losses compound, but so do small gains. A little more leg strength, a little better power output, a little less fatigue at the end of the day, a little more reserve when balance is challenged. That little is often what keeps an incident from becoming an injury. The fourth mechanism is brain energy and cognition. This is where the science is promising, but deserves careful language. Your brain uses enormous amounts of energy, and creatine plays a role in brain energy homeostasis, just as it does in muscle. Several reviews suggest creatine supplementation may support cognitive performance under certain conditions, particularly fatigue, sleep deprivation, or increased metabolic stress. A 2023 meta-analysis found overall improvements in memory performance, and the effect appeared stronger in older adults than in younger adults. That does not mean creatine turns back cognitive aging. It does not mean everyone will notice a dramatic change, and it absolutely does not mean creatine is a treatment for dementia. But it does suggest something important. When the brain is under energy strain, creatine may help. That matters because many older adults do not describe their cognitive complaints as memory loss in the dramatic sense. They describe them as effort. I can do it, but it takes more out of me. I can focus, but not for as long. I am sharp in the morning, then fade. That is exactly the kind of territory where cellular energy support becomes interesting. The fifth mechanism is recovery and resilience. Healthy aging is not just about peak performance. It is about how quickly you come back after exercise, after poor sleep, after illness, after a stressful week, after a long travel day. A body with better energy buffering, better training response, and more preserved muscle is a body with more margin, and margin is everything in aging. Because the opposite of margin is not inconvenience. The opposite of margin is a cascading decline from one event you could not absorb. This is where creatine becomes more than a supplement story. It becomes a resilience story. Now let's deal with the question most people are actually asking. Does adding creatine to coffee specifically make sense? Yes, with a few important caveats. Caffeine and creatine do different things. Caffeine can improve alertness and reduce perceived effort fairly quickly. Creatine works by building up tissue stores over days to weeks. There has been debate over whether caffeine interferes with creatine's benefits, but the better modern reading of the evidence is that creatine still works, though some people may experience more gastrointestinal discomfort when combining the two. In other words, the bigger real-world issue is not that coffee cancels creatine. The bigger issue is tolerance. There is, however, one technical detail many people miss. Creatine is stable as a powder, but once dissolved in liquid, especially hot and acidic liquid, it gradually degrades to creatinine faster than it would in cooler conditions. Coffee is hot and acidic, so if you mix creatine into coffee and let it sit for an hour, that is not ideal. If you stir it in and drink it promptly, that is a much more practical approach. Better yet, if you are sensitive to texture or stomach upset, you can take creatine alongside your coffee and water, milk, yogurt, or a smoothie. The goal is not to worship the coffee ritual. The goal is to take creatine consistently. And this is where many people make the same mistake. They expect creatine to feel like caffeine. It does not. Coffee says, "I feel something now." Creatine says, "Use me daily and measure me in strength, function, recovery, and reserve." That difference is why some people quit before the benefits arrive. They are waiting for a buzz when they should be watching for stability. So what does the evidence actually support most strongly? If you strip away all the marketing and look only at the higher quality findings, the strongest case is this. Creatine monohydrate is one of the best studied supplements in nutrition science. It is considered safe for healthy adults when used appropriately. In older adults, it is most consistently helpful for lean mass and strength when paired with resistance training. It may also improve certain functional outcomes relevant to independence. Its cognitive benefits are promising, especially under fatigue or in older populations, but less settled than the muscle data. And it is not a shortcut around movement, protein, sleep, or medical care. It is an amplifier, a support, a reserve builder. That distinction matters because the internet loves the phrase, "add this to your coffee," as if the coffee itself becomes a medical intervention. Real physiology is less theatrical and more useful. Creatine is not making your coffee magical. It is turning a daily habit into a delivery system for a compound your muscles and brain can actually use. Now let's talk protocol, because this is where effectiveness is often won or lost. First, the form matters. Use creatine monohydrate. Not a flashy proprietary blend, not a mystery matrix, not a better than monohydrate claim with no serious evidence behind it. The most studied, most supported, and generally most cost-effective form is plain creatine monohydrate. Second, dose matters less than consistency, but it still matters. For most older adults, 3 to 5 grams per day is a sensible long-term dose. Some traditional protocols begin with a loading phase of 20 grams per day split into 4 doses for 5 to 7 days, followed by a maintenance dose of 3 to 5 grams daily. That approach saturates stores faster, but it is not required if you want a gentler, simpler strategy. Taking 3 to 5 grams daily without a loading phase will still raise tissue stores over several weeks. For many seniors, simpler is better. 1 scoop once a day, done. Third, timing is not nearly as important as repetition. Morning coffee works because morning habits are sticky. If adding creatine to coffee means you will remember it every day, that is useful. But if coffee upsets your stomach, if you only drink it occasionally, or if you prefer tea, water, yogurt, or a shake, the creatine does not care. Daily adherence beats perfect timing. Fourth, drink it promptly if you mix it into hot coffee. This is a practical chemistry issue, not a dramatic danger. The longer creatine sits dissolved in hot, acidic liquid, the more it degrades. So do not pre-mix it and leave it on the counter. Stir, drink, move on. Fifth, understand what results should look like. If your expectation is, "I took it twice and felt 10 years younger," you will be disappointed. A more realistic timeline is this. Within days, you may notice nothing dramatic. Within a few weeks, tissue stores rise. Over several weeks to months, if you are also walking, lifting, or doing resistance training, that is when the meaningful benefits are more likely to show up, not as fireworks, as traction. A little more strength, a little less fatigue with repeated effort, a little easier recovery, a little more confidence in movement. That is how healthy aging usually feels when it is working, not spectacular, sustainable. Now the warnings, because responsible advice includes boundaries. Creatine is widely regarded as safe for healthy adults, and evidence from major reviews and NIH guidance does not support the old myth that standard creatine use damages healthy kidneys. But if you already have kidney disease, significant renal impairment, or complex medical issues affecting fluid balance, you should speak with your clinician before using it. Not because creatine is automatically dangerous, but because pre-existing disease changes the conversation. The same is true if you are on medications or have a medical history that deserves supervision. Some people experience bloating, mild stomach discomfort, or loose stools, especially with larger doses or loading phases. That is one reason many older adults do better simply taking 3 to 5 grams once daily rather than trying to front-load 20 grams. Hydration also matters, not because creatine is secretly dehydrating you, but because any supplement that shifts intracellular water and is taken alongside caffeine should be matched with common sense. And there is one final mistake I see again and again. People add creatine to a life that has no training signal at all, then decide it didn't work. Can creatine still have value without formal exercise? Possibly, especially as a way to support tissue stores. But the most reliable benefits in older adults show up when creatine is paired with resistance training or at least some consistent muscular demand. That does not mean you need a barbell and a gym membership. It can mean chair stands, bands, dumbbells, step-ups, bodyweight movements, supervised strength work, physical therapy exercises, or a structured walking and strength routine. But the message is the same. Creatine gives your body better material to work with. You still have to ask the body to work. That is the deeper point of this whole story. Aging is not a punishment. It is a negotiation, and the people who do best are often not the ones chasing intensity. They are the ones protecting capacity, protecting muscle, protecting balance, protecting recovery, protecting the invisible energy systems that determine whether daily life stays wide open or gradually narrows. Creatine matters because it's right at that intersection. Not glamour, function, not hype, reserve, not pretending age does not exist, helping the body carry age better. So if you are over 60 and you want better energy, understand what kind of energy you are trying to improve. If you mean the sharp, immediate lift that gets you through the morning, coffee already gives you part of that. If you mean the deeper energy of movement, recovery, strength, and resilience, the kind that decides whether effort feels manageable or draining, that is where creatine becomes interesting. Especially when used daily, especially when paired with strength work, especially when judged over months, not mornings. And maybe that is why this simple white powder has been so misunderstood for so long. It does not flatter vanity as easily as flashy anti-aging promises do. It does not sell itself with exotic mystery. It is not trying to impress you. It is doing something much more valuable. It is supporting one of the oldest truths in biology. Life depends on energy. Health depends on where that energy can go. And aging, more than almost anything else, reveals what happens when the reserve runs low. If you decide to try it, keep it simple. Use creatine monohydrate. Start with 3 grams if you want to ease in, or 5 grams if you tolerate supplements well. Mix it into your coffee and drink it promptly, or take it alongside coffee if that feels better. Pair it with movement. Give it time. Watch what happens, not just to how alert you feel at AM, but to how steady you feel at PM, how strong you feel getting out of a chair, how recovered you feel the next day, and how much confidence returns to the ordinary movements that quietly shape your independence. Because that is the real prize, not a stimulant high, not a miracle, a wider margin, and after 60, that margin can change everything. If you've ever tried creatine, or if you're thinking about adding it to your routine, I'd want to know one thing first. Are you looking for more energy in your mind, more strength in your body, or more confidence in how you age? Because the answer to that question usually reveals what the body has been missing all along.